So good morning. I'm Vasundhara, founder of Read to Lead. I welcome all of you for this session of November. First Sunday of every month, we've gathered here to hear Mehnosh Randeria, who's going to speak on psychology of money. Now, about Read to Lead, most of the members who are right now there are our regular members, but those who have joined just newly for the first time, for them, yeah, this is an initiative which has started, say, 4.5 years back. And this coming March, we'll be completing 5 long years of Read to Lead journey. The journey which was just started as, friends coming together and having a mutual sharing of knowledge, and then we thought, okay, we should have book around which we can discuss, and we never ever thought that it's going to get this kind of response, this kind of love, this kind of loyalty from the members and friends and family who have joined us already and who are spreading the word. There is no formal marketing done, or there is no formal selling done, because this is a completely free session. Why I said so many times is because people just don't believe that such sharing by such eminent speakers on such powerful books happens every month, and there is no commercial involved in it. It's completely pro bono. They definitely doubt kuch to selling hota hoga. We must be taking money from new authors and making them speak, or we have commission in selling books. I've got weird questions from people, because people can't believe in today's world that something like this is available, and it's completely free, and it's pure genuine effort of getting the learning community together and spreading the knowledge, which is that wealth of knowledge which is there in the books. And it's a completely blessed forum, because we have evolved audience. The speakers are eminent speakers from the industry. They are authors, but who are already established. They come and speak. And even our members are so evolved that when the discussion happens, when the question answer session is there, that's a different takeaway altogether. We used to do it physically in SIS School of Management, Nerul, till I think Feb, and then March onwards, the pandemic hit. But it's blessing that I feel we didn't miss even one session till today, even in the pandemic. We started immediately from March onwards, and we've been having virtual sessions since then, with equal response, with equal love, and with equal amount of interaction. Though obviously virtual platform has certain limitation, but thank you so much. Just before the session, I was talking with Mr. Nara Subramaniam. Now he's regular with us. I should call him a regular member now, because I think last 1 or 2 sessions he was already there. He's joined us from Malaysia. He's already shared it with other friends, and it's a validation for our efforts, that people are adjusting their time zones, and they're finding value in this session, and they are still being here on the session. Now, to all of you, I know Diwali is still on, it's still not over, or the fatigue is still there. I'm already in bright yellow. That shows that Diwali mood is still on, and still you all have chosen to be here at 9 o'clock to hear about the book, to learn, to share. Salute to all of you. Salute for that jazba of learning, and that urge to learn and be there, part of this learning community. So thank you so much for being there, because it's very, very crucial time today, 9 o'clock, and just post Diwali. Either you are tired or whatever, but thank you so much for being there. About Mehnosh Randeria, I can talk for another 2 hours and the session will be over, and you will be cursing me. So I'm going to keep it very short. There are 2 reasons. One is, because I want the session to be enjoyed by all of you. And second is, Meher has a style of introducing himself, and I've done workshops with him. So I've seen the effect physically, actually, in the banquet halls and in the auditorium. He has a very unique style of introducing, and the moment he starts, his introduction, his own style, everybody sinks in the chair. And I'm actually talking the truth. You all will do. Unfortunately, I'll not be able to see the effect because he is one of his kind. जो वो है वो हम कोई नहीं है और शायद कोई बन भी नहीं सकता है. What I'm saying, you will understand. In short, Mernosh Randeria is, yes, W3 coach, the only W3 coach. His health I can talk about, and what he has taken, the kind of steps he takes to keep his fitness and health complete inside out is a different topic altogether. He's well. He's actually a coach for biggies, how to do financial management, and he's been CFO at Nissan. I think I'll not talk much. And wellness inside out. For me personally, he is my Durga. He is emotionally always so stable that anytime I need that, support, he's the one I'll call up, and I know his wisdom or his guidance will just cool me down and let me look at the whole problem in completely different light. That's the power he has. So not much more because I can keep talking about Mernosh. I'm guaranteeing you the session is going to be awesome. Obviously, also because the topic is psychology of money. सबसे बड़ा रुपया just लक्ष्मी पूजन करके बैठे हैं. Without much ado, Mernosh Randeria presenting to all of you. Over to you, Mernosh.
Thank you so much. Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And अभी वसुंधरा ने इतना बोल दिया है कि I don't know how I'm going to live up to her expectation. Thank you. And it's always a pleasure to be at Read to Lead. I think just a few months before the lockdown, we had done the physical session also at Nerul. So great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so friends, welcome. And once again, good morning. For the topic, you are all aware, it's Psychology of Money, the very famous book, the bestseller. Before I get into the session, I would like to understand from you all that how many of you all have read the book. You can type in the chat box, you've read or not read. No, not read. Okay, read. Okay. Planning to read. Okay. Read yesterday only. Okay. In progress. Ordered the book. Okay. Not read. Okay. Good. So there's a good mix of people who have read and who have not read. Okay. Listen on Audible. Yeah. Even first time I heard it on Audible, and then I read and listen. Okay. Great. Know the summary. Good. Okay. Great. Thanks for sharing. Well, one thing, let me tell you that for you to understand today's session, it's okay even if you have not read the book, because my idea is to make it simple, and then you decide if you want to read it. You can still read it. In fact, there are lots more nuggets in the book than what I'm going to share. But definitely, I'm sure you'll get excited and curious to read it after today's session. Okay, so
yeah, Mernosh.
Yeah.
You want people to have their videos on, or I mean, it's as per the speaker's preference. Mute, yes, definitely till you ask them to speak. But videos, just let me know whether you're comfortable that way or this way. And you've gone on mute.
I would prefer if the videos are on.
Okay.
However, it's not a compulsion.
Cool.
Because it's always better as a speaker to see the faces while talking. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you for turning on the videos. Good to see you all. Okay. All right. So, Psychology of Money, very famous book by Morgan Housel. And Vasundhara has already spoken a lot about me. I am known as the W3 coach. The W3 stands for Wealth, Wisdom, and Wellness. Please keep yourself on mute.
Should I mute on? Should I mute on?
Yeah, you can just mute everyone, please.
You unmute. Mernosh, you unmute.
All right. The tagline of the book says timeless lessons on wealth, greed, and happiness. And the way I connect it to my core of W3 is that for me it actually turned out to be timeless wisdom on wealth that allows you to enjoy your wellness. So let's have a quick discussion here. Then type in the chat box. What according to you is wealth? What is wealth? Freedom, choice. Wonderful, Ajay. Living healthy life. Yes, health is wealth. Overall wellness. Money for happiness. Wisdom, happiness. Freedom, liberty to do whatever, whenever, wherever. Yeah. Whatever enables the life that you want to live. Confidence. Okay. Wisdom to enjoy money for long term. Asset generates income. Money works for us. Money, good. Fulfilling dream. Yeah, it's a means to fulfill dreams. Stress-free life, containment. Wealth is something which gives you freedom to enjoy what you want to do and contribute to society. Superb. So I hope you all agree that wealth is important. यहाँ कोई है जो सोचता है कि wealth सब मोह माया है, छोड़ो उसके पीछे नहीं पड़ने का होता है? Anyone like that over here? Yeah, so wealth is important. Okay, spirituality is one thing, but that doesn't mean that if you're spiritual, you need not pursue material wealth. In fact, if you have more wealth, you can choose to be more spiritual. You can choose to be whatever you want to do without having that nagging worry. Okay, bhai, you know, ये month पैसा कहाँ से आएगा? How will I handle my own self and my family's future and everything? Right? Money working for you to enable you to pursue your passion. Yeah, very good. Don't repeat and regret from that. I could do this or that if I had money. Yeah, yeah. Don't repent and yeah. Spiritual, mental, social, financial health. There you go. So wealth is an integral part of your well-being. Let's understand that. So that's where I'm going to integrate some learnings from the book and some insights from my side also as W3 coach, how we can blend the two. But it's going to be a mixture of what Morgan Housel says about the psychology of money. That is his profile. I could only get his LinkedIn profile. So this is, he's a partner of a hedge fund, collaborative fund, and he has all these experience and he's been to University of Southern California and all. So that's a bit about the author. You can definitely look out on the net and find more about him. But the way he has described things in the book, when I was reading the book, I felt as if if I would have said anything on psychology of money, it would have been almost the same. And that's why it resonated so much with me. And that's why when Vasundhara said, which book would you like to pick up for the read to lead? I said, yeah, let's go for this one because this is so close to me. So that's about the author and a bit about me. That is what Vasundhara was saying, the way I introduced myself. So here it comes. That's my mind map of my introduction, my profile. So I'm India's first and only W3 coach. I cover topics of wealth, wisdom, and wellness. And education-wise, I'm a finance professional, a chartered accountant, cost accountant, MBA, and whatnot. You can see over here. And since the last 7 years, I'm fully into training and coaching. Prior to that, I had corporate experience of 18 years with various companies like Nissan and Legrand and Johnson Controls, and which began with PwC. And the certifications are, few of them are over here. There are a lot more. In fact, when I'm not teaching, I'm learning. So it keeps adding on. On my website, there is a list of around 96 certifications. So that's about me in very brief. I won't take much time to get into that. You can read more about me on my website, which is w3coach.com. So let's understand financial decisions. How do people take their decisions, or rather, I would say, what governs financial results? Not just financial decisions, what governs the financial results, your success of growing your wealth. Broadly, we can put them into two categories. One is external and the other is internal. External things like market cycle, stock selection, or other anything that you invest in, which avenue you want to invest in, asset allocation, which is how much you're putting in your FDs and gold, in real estate and equity markets, and today's fad of the day, which is Bitcoin. जहाँ भी आप डालोगे, how do you manage all of that? That is all depending on external factors, are which are which will guide the market flow and how your money grows. Apart from that, there are internal factors as well. And what are these internal factors? This is your attitude and approach towards money. This is about your beliefs about money. And this is exactly what is the psychology of money. So the book focuses on the internal factors. There are some techniques, tips given about external investing as well. But more important than that, it talks about how people look at money, what money does to people, how is your well-being affected by your wealth. And that's exactly what we are going to get into. So I'm going to ask you a question. Would you ever invest if I told you that over the next 30 years, these are the events which are going to happen? Yeah, global financial crisis, a major pandemic, demonetization, two major scams, a major world war, a major war with a neighboring country, an international war, and maybe a few more bad news. Would you invest? Best time to invest more. Yeah, Deepak is saying. We'll think. Yeah, Binal says we'll think. What do you think? Come on, type in the chat box, please. Market का क्या होगा? If I tell you put your money in the stock market when all these things are happening, or I'm telling you that these things are going to happen, put your money in stock market. What would you do? You look for a safer option. You say no. Yeah. But these are not forecasted events, my friends. This is what has actually happened in the last 30 years. And in the last 30 years, in spite of all of this is how the market has behaved. I finished investing, now reaping the fruits. Yeah, can anyone predict the market? No one can predict the market. I'm telling you a hypothetical situation about what could be the events. And this is how the Sensex has grown. In fact, this chart is till July 2021. Uske aage dekhoge to it has gone up to 60,000. 2 days back on Murat trading, again, it had reached a peak of 60,000. But in spite of all these events, all this happened and the market has gone up. So what do you think? What's happening over here? How come we are saying that no, aisa hoga to who will invest in all these if all these things are happening? But we had a demonetization, we had Corona, we had Ketan Parekh and Harshad Mehta scams, we had the Kargil war, we had the Gulf War, 2007-8 ka global financial crisis. But on hindsight, if you see, the market has gone up. So what is your takeaway from just this much? What do you think? Type in the chat box. What are we trying to say over here? Life goes on. Yeah, economy is still growing. Yes. I know some who are still scared and not invest but just save. Yeah. Market will grow in spite of all challenges. Every dip is considered opportunity. Balanced investment. Given the time, economy will grow. Yeah. No right time to invest. Yes, we talk about that also. Time or timing. Overcome emotions. Keep long-term view. Business continues. Markets will be uncertain, but long-term there will be growth. Right. In the long-term, market gives good returns, even though in short term it is volatile. Market will correct and move forward. Yes. Some section of people take more risk during uncertainty. Uncertainty to apna sathi hai. It's going to be there all the time. And everything is a game of probability. We'll talk more about that. Market to ko fark nahi padta. Yes, whatever may be the prediction, one must invest some amount, some portion of saving. Exactly. So it is said that, if you look at this chart, if you had put in 1 lakh rupees in 1980, in 2021, it would have reached 6 crore rupees. Now, hindsight में बोलना अच्छा है, you get a lot of WhatsApp messages also. Wipro में डाला होता तो इतना होता, Infosys में डाला होता तो ये होता. Instead of buying a bike, you would have bought shares of iShares. It would have gone up so much. A lot of, all these nuggets keep coming in the WhatsApp university. The question to understand here is, okay, all this is good. These are all facts. These are all facts, right? This has gone up. You can't deny it. The question is, how many investors actually earned these returns? How many people would be there in this country at least who would have stayed invested since 1980, put on 1 lakh rupees or whatever, and they have grown their net worth to 6 crores? Not even 1%. Yeah, could count on fingers. Yeah. 41 years is a long time. Yeah. Less than 1%. For sure. See, that is what the psychology of money is all about. If you see this chart, somebody invested here. Okay, Harshad Mehta ke scam mein dala, and then gone, market crashed. Typically, what happens? The moment there is a crash, people want to exit. And a very recent phenomenon that we all saw was during the March 2020 crash. Because of Corona, because of the lockdown, market crashed. And uske baad kahan gaya? Look at this. You see this COVID-19 pandemic continues. And that was a dip where it went almost around 25,000. And now it is at 60,000. And tabhi people exited. The way the emotions work in the market for the investors is that there is an element of greed and fear. People are greedy when the market is up. And that time they say, now I have to invest because market or upar ja raha hai. Or today there are some people who still think that ye pura bubble hai, kabhi bhi crash ho sakta hai, better to stay away. And they have been following this philosophy since last 6 to 9 months. And they are wondering, main dalta to at least it would have gone up now. The point is that people get lost in the process of trying to time the market. But if you see over long term, the timing really does not matter. What matters is the time in the market rather than the timing of the entry. So how come people have not made actually these kind of returns, or only less than 1% have made it? Because there is a gap between the investment return and the investor return. And this is a behavior gap. The behavior, the psychology. A very interesting thing which Morgan Housel says is that knowing what to do tells you nothing about what happens in your head when you try to do it. ये सब ज्ञान अच्छा है. हाँ, we'll invest, we will not withdraw. We will stay invested for the long term because market with the long term makes sense. But then how many people actually stay there without panicking? So knowing is one thing and doing is something else. And the gap between knowing and doing is what happens in your head when you try to do it. Your emotions play a big role. That's what is the psychology. In the book, Morgan talks about two people. One is Ronald Reid and the other is Richard Fuscon. Ronald Reid was a gas station attendant and janitor, and he was an American philanthropist as well. Quite a polarity, right? Now, what happened is that he saved throughout his life and he lived frugally. And when he died, he had a wealth of $8 million net worth. And then that was left to a local hospital and library. Whereas Richard Fuscon, he was Harvard educated, he was a Merrill Lynch executive. He borrowed heavily, he spent lavishly. And he got by the 2008 financial crisis and was declared bankrupt. The difference which makes the difference over here is that Ronald Reid was patient and Richard Fuscon was greedy. He took more debt to grow his money, and then the financial crisis happened. So that's all it took to eclipse the massive education and experience gap between the two. A janitor and a Harvard educated. So it's not about education. Doing well with money has a little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. Your education, qualification, your experience, वो सब बाजू में. Because money can spike you at times. Financial success is not a hard science, it's a soft skill where how you behave is more important than what you know. And to grasp what in debt, you don't need to study interest rates. You need to study the history of greed, insecurity, and optimism. In the book, there are a lot of short stories and real and anecdotes which the author shares. We'll go through a few of them. And what I truly believe is that personal finance is more about personal than about finance. Finance is often thought to be a hard science, a mathematical concept, and people say, नहीं मुझे नहीं समझता है. But आपको समझे या ना समझे, the key thing is that what you are doing in personal finance is more about your personal being, your behavior, your thought process, your attitude towards money. And that personal aspect is so individualistic that will differ from person to person. Just think about it. How many of y'all can relate to people who make financial decisions which, according to you, you would never even do such things? People go and take loans to buy houses, or they might invest in Bitcoin, and you say, no, this is not my cup of tea. I would not invest where I'm not understanding things. Or people buy lottery. Yeah, there will be so many examples in your life when you look around and you say, but I would never do that. People sell and buy real estate one after the other, and pagal hai kya? Abhi khaud real estate buy karega. Right? So that is what is more about personal than about finance. Your personal experience with money make up a very small fraction, 0.000001% of what's happened in the world, but 80% of what you think the world, how you think the world works. It's not about what is true factually. It's about what you think to be true. What is your own reality and the reality that you create. For example, talking about the stock market. Right now, some people are still waiting for the market to crash. ये bubble और कितना बढ़ेगा? And what would happen if even a minor blip, even a small crash comes in? It's going to be a correction. It may come, it may not come. We don't know. We can't predict. But what would happen is that these people would say, देखो मैंने बोला था, कब तक ऊपर जाएगा? कभी तो crash होने वाला है. At the same time, there are some people who believe that market is going to go up. Now, when the crash comes, what are they going to think? Buy, right? They will look at it as an opportunity. They'll say, oh, so what? These blips keep happening. This is the minor error. It's an aberration. Ultimately, तो ऊपर ही जाने वाला है. Correction नहीं होगा तो थोड़ी ऊपर जाएगा. It's part of volatility anyway, right? Now, what is happening over here? The factual thing which is happening out there in the market is that the market has corrected. But the way these two people have interpreted it as how it matters to them, that is different for each person. The story, self-justification, exactly. Someone may say, abhi aur girega. Someone will say, nahi, abhi le lo. Someone will say, no, let's take it as a SIP, as a systematic investment plan. Different people will react differently to the same external stimuli. It's not what happens out there. It's the meaning that you give to what happens out there. And that is the personal aspect of the finance. And this is something which I also teach a lot, is the basis of NLP and neuro linguistic programming. We talk that the mind is a meaning making machine. And whatever you do, your actions are governed by what meaning you are giving to things which are happening around you. This applies not only in case of money, but everything. What your family member is doing is one thing, but what meaning you interpret is the way you will operate from. So let's do a very quick activity. I want everyone to keep your videos on, please. Please switch on your videos.
You may take photographs now so that
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have
sure.
to ask them to, keep the
You
video
can do
on
that.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you. Keep your videos on. Okay. I want you to all become aware of your surroundings right now. And look around the room, wherever you are, even if you're outdoors, look around and spot everything that is red in color. Make a mental note of everything which is red in color. Okay, look around. You can even look on the screen if you see anything red in color here. Make a note of everything which is red in color. Okay, now stop. Time up. Now close your eyes. Close your eyes. And now try to make a list mentally of everything that is blue in color around you. Try to come up with as many things which are around you which are blue in color. Keep your eyes closed, no cheating. Okay. Okay, now you can open your eyes and quickly check how many things did you notice and how many things did you miss out? Did you miss out more or did you note more? Yeah, missed many. Type in the chat box. What was your experience? Hardly remembered. Almost equal. Okay. Missed many. Missed out completely. Missed more. Yeah. Missed Ajay and Shafi's t-shirts. Okay. Zero noted in blue color. No blue around. No blue around. Dekho. There's really nothing blue. On the
Sure, there
screen.
was no blue
Okay.
at all. There's no blue in my house.
Yeah, Poonam.
Except the skies, there's nothing blue and the background of yours.
Yeah, my background is at least there. Yeah.
It's
And that was all
blue, yeah.
there in front of you. Right.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, but it's there. I mean, when you close your eyes, it didn't come, but it was there.
No. It was, yeah, it didn't come in.
Yeah, it didn't come. Right. So all the blues that you missed out, it's not that you had to really look in depth for them. They were all there around you. But just that you didn't focus your mind on it earlier, though nahi aaya. It's just natural. This is not to say, Arey, I'm not that alert, I'm not that aware. Nothing like that. This is just natural. What you choose to focus on is what you will see more of. And same thing when it comes to anything, whether it's money or any area of your life, whatever you choose to focus on, you will see more of that. And that is what the mind is, a meaning making machine. What meaning you are making around things around you is what is going to decide what you do. So whether you find people investing or not investing, like someone had written that people are still keeping money in FD without investing anywhere else, because they are seeing the risk in the market and that's the only thing they are seeing. Maybe their own experience of the past, maybe other people's experience, but that is what they are choosing to focus on, and that's what is becoming their reality. So every decision people make with money is justified by taking the information they have at the moment and plugging it into their unique mental model of how the world works. In NLP, we call it as the model of the mind. Each person has a unique model of their world, and everyone is looking at things from their perspective only. And there is no one who is right and no one who is wrong. How many of you all here have dabbled in lottery? Never. Okay. Now, a study has shown, and you tell me, who are people who are more likely to dabble in lottery? The rich people or the poor people? Poor people. Poor people are more likely to buy a lottery ticket even if they don't have money to buy even a lottery ticket. The rich people will, I'm not saying rich people don't do that, but fewer percentage of rich people will go and buy lotteries. But the poor people will buy more of lottery. So what do you think is happening here? Rich people gamble differently. I like that. People who believe in luck instead of knowledge. Shortcut maker. What makes people, poor people who are not even sure whether they will have enough money to survive the month, they go and buy a lottery ticket. People who have less to lose, hope, lazy people, faith, hope and desperation. Yeah. The only thing that they see is there is a hope to change their lives, right? नहीं तो ये काम करते करते तो कुछ होने वाला नहीं है, इतना ही पगार मिलेगा, इतना ही पैसा मिलता है, nothing can happen. But even that small probability of could be 0.0001%, that probability gives them hope. At least हो गया तो imagine where I will be. So it's not that people, you may think that the person does not have money and he is going and becoming a juari and buying lottery and all, but think about the way that person thinks. For that person, they are getting that hope that things can change for them if just this lottery ticket works for them. डूबते हुए को तिनके का सहारा. Yeah, expecting overnight change. More money will not solve the problem. Good one, Binu. In fact, there is a saying that if you can't handle 10,000 rupees, you won't be able to handle 1 crore rupees. So it's not about what amount you are having, what is the money which was circulated, which was available to you. What matters is that how you spend that. How you manage the money is more important than how much you're making. So this is one key takeaway from the chapter of this book, which is titled as No One is Crazy. We may think people are crazy doing this, that. How can someone even think like this? But no one is crazy because they are all operating from their own mental models. The next part of the book goes to talk about factors like luck and risk. What do you think? Is luck there? Do you believe in luck? Do you believe in risk? Or is it all, everything is only based on your efforts? Does luck play a role or no? Risk. Risk is there. What is the difference between luck and risk? Probability. Yes. Luck do play a role until we take risk. Okay. Calculated risk we plan. Luck is opportunity plus preparedness. Yes. Said that luck, the full form of luck, is labor under correct knowledge. LUCK. Talking about luck and risk, basically both are parts of the same coin. Two sides of the same coin. Everything that you do, whether you invest in something or you take any decision, the chances of the decision being fruitful or not, being a good decision or not, there is an element of a probability in that. Would you agree? In hindsight, you can always look back and say, oh, this was the right thing or the wrong thing. But before making a decision, there is always a probability. Now, what Morgan Housel says is that this probability, when it works for you, people call it luck. And this same probability, when it's on the other side, when it's not working for you, people call it risk. But they are two sides of the same coin. And the more sooner you realize that there is a role of some external factor, the better it will be for you to realize that what you need to do. What learning do you take from this? So the reality is that every outcome in life is also guided by forces other than individual effort. And luck and risk are so similar that you can't believe in one without equally respecting the other. There is a quote from Bill Gates. He says that success is a lousy teacher. It produces smart people to think that they can't lose. People become overconfident. And they think that abhi ye chal gaya, everything I have that made as such, whatever I do is going to work. So I can do whatever I want and it will work. Okay, it's good to have that confidence, but sometimes it may result in overconfidence and people may ignore the role of certain external events. Now, realizing the role of external events is not to say कि नहीं मैं कुछ भी करेगा तो ये तो luck और risk पे depend करता है. Not like that. It's about you realizing that there could be a chance that what you have decided may happen for the good or may not happen for the good. It may create success or it may not create success. Rather than saying, I am so 100% sure that hoga hi. So optimism is one thing, but what Morgan also says is that have a sensible optimism. And I'll show that the slide later on also, but he says that the best part about planning is to plan for the plan, not following the plan. So what do you do when the plan does not meet the plan? What backup do you have? And being prepared for that is very important when it comes to psychology of money. So while Bill Gates says that success is a lousy teacher, what Morgan Housel says is that failure is also a lousy teacher. Because it seduces smart people into thinking that their decisions were terrible. And sometimes they just reflect the unforgiving realities of risk. If there is a failure, how do you take a learning from it? Like again, I keep referring to NLP because that's a topic, a subject which is close to my heart. In neuro-linguistic programming, one of the principles is that there is no failure, there is only feedback. What feedback do I get from this? Now, failure being a lousy teacher here is that people say that I am not meant to do this, I'm not called out for this. Chodo, ye mere bas ki baat nahi hai. But realize that anything that you do, they will have a possibility of success or failure. How do you integrate that within you as you take action? So everything worth pursuing has less than 100% probability of succeeding. And risk is what happens when you end up on the unfortunate side of that equation. In the book, there is a reference of John B. Rockefeller. And one of the cases he was involved in, legal cases he was involved in, the judge, in fact, said that you are nothing but a petty criminal. So there are two ways to look at it. One is that he didn't let the outdated laws get in the way of innovation. And he was one of the richest men in the world. Or the other way to look at it is that he committed a crime. Now, which one works best? Which one is the way that what meaning are you making out of it will set your path for the future? Two ways to look at things. Customer is always right, and customers don't know what they want. Which is the right way to look at things? What do you think? Is customer always right, or do customers don't know what they want? Yeah, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Yeah, yeah. They don't know what they want. Yeah. So both will have their own perspective. Both will be true in certain ways. Can you think of someone who is a successful person who believed that customers don't know what they want? Who is that person? Any known successful entrepreneur? Apple, yes. Steve Jobs, when he came up with his Apple products, he believed that customers don't know what they want, and his partners they were ridiculing him that nahi, iska market nahi hai. People are happy with the IBM type of products, and he says no, they don't know what they want. Let us give them, then they will believe it. Yeah, even Henry Ford. I was saying of Henry Ford that if we had not made cars, then probably people would have thought that horses are the fastest vehicle. So because they were using horses, they didn't know that the realization is the requirement is there of a car, and car can work for them. Every innovation came from this aspect. Now, does that mean that we ignore the aspect that the customer is always right? Both will have their own context where either of them, each of them will work. Years ago, Facebook was given an offer from Yahoo, around $1 billion offer to buy out Facebook. Yahoo wanted to buy out Facebook. And Facebook did not accept that. Today, in hindsight, when you look at it, what do you think? Was it a good decision or a bad decision? Good decision. Yeah, because Facebook is doing much better right now, right? Best decision. So now, does that mean that any buyout offer is something that you should reject? Few years ago, Yahoo was given the offer of buyout from Microsoft, and Yahoo did not accept it. Good decision or bad decision? Hindsight is so 2020. Hindsight is so accurate. We know, अरे ये करना चाहिए था, या ये नहीं करना चाहिए था, या फिर ये किया तो अच्छा किया, नहीं किया तो अच्छा किया. But that is all coming from hindsight. Yeah, sometimes buyouts happen to eliminate competition. All that is fine. But what was the best thing to do at that time? You can only figure out in hindsight. So, what are the actionable takeaways when it comes to understanding the role of risk and luck? Be careful of people who you praise and admire. And at the same time, be careful of people who you look down upon and wish to avoid becoming. We have role models in life, and we say that, oh, Steve Jobs, I wish to model him. Or Sir Ratan Tata, I wish to model him. Or let's say Richard Branson, I wish to model him. We look up to people as exemplars, as role models that we want to model. But be clear that whatever they did, of course, it worked. But what are the trends that they went into? What were the patterns of thinking? Even in NLP, there is a fundamental premise that people are not their behavior. The person is separate, the behavior is separate. What you want to model is separate. So when you are choosing to model someone or praise someone, look down upon someone, find out what is working, what is not working. Yeah, that person's internal attitude, beliefs, all of that did work. But what was the role that external factors also played at that time? Do you have that same? How can you recreate the same? What can you do to make it work for you? And there is this interesting takeaway over here that get out of your way to find humility when things are going right. Before you take all the success for yourself, all the credit. So find humility when things are going right, and find forgiveness and compassion when they go wrong. Because nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Focus less on specific individuals and case studies, and more on the broader patterns. Talking about probability, knowing the fact that whatever you do can have either success or failure. How do you plan better? So we are operating at all times in situations of uncertainty. Now, uncertainty is something that cannot be taken away. That's part of life. Rather, the only thing certain is change. And that change keeps happening. Sometimes in the external world, sometimes in the internal self as well. Both ways the change happens. Now, when you factor, when you plan, can we leave some room for error? What if things don't go 100% as per your plan? What is the probability of that? And what will you do if you figure out that if things don't go as per plan, what are your chances of not succeeding there, and what can you do as an alternative way? So margin of safety you can call it room for error or redundancy, is the only effective way to safely navigate a world that is governed by probabilities and not certainty. So make your plans, but also realize that what is the chance of it not going as per your plan. Yeah, there is a saying that not all successes are due to hard work and not all failures are due to laziness. Yes. Last slide is this one. Okay. This is a nice, interesting letter which Morgan Housel has written to his son when his son was born. Some people are born into families that encourage education, others are against it. Some are born into flourishing economies, encouraging of entrepreneurship, and others are born into war and destitution. I want you to be successful and I want you to earn it. But realize that not all success is due to hard work and not all poverty is due to laziness. Keep this in mind while judging people, including yourselves. And this is how I connect this to the earlier takeaway, where you go look out for humility where things are working really fine for you all the time, and look out for a sense of forgiveness where things are not always working well for you. Right? So, okay, let me show this. Move on to the next section. Three Idiots, yeah. कौन सा सीन है ये?
ह्यूमन बिहेवियर के बारे में उस दिन हमने कुछ जाना। दोस्त फेल हो जाए तो दुख होता है, लेकिन दोस्त फर्स्ट आ जाए तो ज्यादा दुख होता है। हम दुखी थे, लेकिन हमसे ज्यादा दुखी दो और लोग थे।
So, what does this tell you? There is a constant social comparison. Even if you do well and you look at your neighbor or somebody else around you, there is a comparison. Oh, but he is better off. How do I match that? We are more worried about our neighbor. Yeah, judgment. I'm going to show you an interesting video of this. And it starts with what Warren Buffett says about things being never enough for someone. And then there's a nice explanation given with some animation. So please watch that. So it's never enough. And a thing to reflect here is, as you watch this, I want you all to reflect and think, what is your enough? You don't need to share, but have you realized what is your enough? Where do you stop? Okay, let's see.
It's a very interesting phenomenon that you can hand somebody a $2 million bonus and they're fine until they find out that the person next to them got $2.1 million, and then they're sick for the next year.
Capitalism is great at doing two things: generating wealth and generating envy. The urge to surpass your neighbors, peers, and friends can help energize your hard work and strive to really make it. And, of course, being motivated into becoming more productive and doing meaningful work is a good thing. But social comparison can also cause us to feel like we're never enough. Let's look at some statistics. To belong to the top 1% highest income earners in the US, you'd have to earn somewhere around $500,000 a year. That's what a highly specialized doctor, let's call him Bill, earns. And by almost any standard, Bill would be considered rich. He can afford to drive nice cars, go on long vacations to exotic countries, perhaps hire someone to do work which he thinks is tedious, etc. Bill has been feeling good about himself and what he has achieved financially in his life. Well, that was only until he bought a vacation home in the Hamptons and realized that he had Stan as his neighbor. Stan belongs to the top 1% of the 1%. He is a CEO of quite a large public company and earns a staggering $10 million per year. Now, you'd hope that at least Stan would be satisfied with his financial achievements. But nope. This guy was a childhood friend of Michael Jordan. And this all-time great basketball player is someone who belongs to the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. And well, compared to Michael's fortune of about $2 billion, Stan's yearly salary of $10 million suddenly seems like peanuts. Does it end here? Well, no, it doesn't. Because Michael occasionally attends parties with celebrities, where a guy named Jeff Bezos shows up. Bezos is the top 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. And he increased his net worth by about $75 billion in 2020, now sitting at something like $200 billion.
So what's enough? Where does it stop? There is always a bigger fish. There is always someone who will be doing better than you. Now, what is your objective of amassing wealth, of or becoming well-to-do, or at least what is your financial well-being level? The benchmark can only be internal. The moment you create an external benchmark, what happens? You will never be satisfied. Of course, you can be aspirational, you can be ambitious, you can keep going on and on. But then where is that point where you realize that, okay, what I have is enough for me, and okay, whatever ज़्यादा आएगा bonus चलेगा, आने दो. Sorry, container without bottom. Yeah, Adam Smith says it right, that wants are unlimited, needs are limited. It's never enough. So true. Now, what happens when people don't realize what their enough is? There are two case studies given in this book. One is Rajat Gupta, and other is Bernie Madoff. Some of you may have heard about it, what these two are famous for, or rather I would say infamous for. Rajat Gupta was an Indian-American businessman. He was the first foreign-born MD of McKinsey. He retired from McKinsey in 2007, and then he joined Goldman Sachs as an ex-director, and he was earning quite a huge amount of money, even as a director of Goldman Sachs. He was also a philanthropist. He had risen from the slums of Kolkata, and in 2008, he had a net worth of $100 million. Now, enough? Is this enough? Of course, it's enough, provided you consider it to be enough. Provided Rajat Gupta considered it to be enough. But for him, there was an opportunity. In 2012, when Goldman Sachs was advisor to Warren Buffett, internally he came to know that Warren Buffett is going to buy some shares. And if Warren Buffett buys those shares, does that transaction, the prices will go up. So he did an insider trading with another colleague of his, and he made around $17 million. But then when it came to fore that he had done it through insider trading, he got arrested. And all his reputation, his career went for a toss. Was it needed? Is the question. What makes people do things which you may say, kyun kar rahe? You know, everything is so good. Why does someone get into that spirit of greed? Bernie Madoff, he was again infamous for his Ponzi scheme. But before that, he had a reputation of being a most successful and legitimate trading business, earning $25 to $50 million a year. So why did he even bother to swindle investors? The bottom line here is that they had no sense of what is enough. And to make what they didn't have and didn't need, they risked what they did have and did need. So where do you draw the line? And that's your internal parameter, your own internal benchmark that you create. Okay, fine, this is my enough. And this is something which I will never, never, ever do come what may. So actionable takeaways from being never enough. There is no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalposts to stop moving. If you're chasing a moving target, then that target will never make you satisfied. You'll achieve one and then, oh, someone else is there who's better off than me. Let's get going on that. Social comparison is a process without end, and there is always someone higher up on the ladder. And by the way, enough does not mean that you have to go without. Enough means that you know when to avoid doing something that you will regret. This is a very important point. Enough means you know when to avoid doing something that you will regret. Yes, Vasundhara has a question. Sure, you can ask.
Yeah, I'm just asking. I was actually introspecting and going through my own journey. Here, I just thought of, when I started as a, young person getting into this life and earning, I had a very small dream: 2-bedroom hall kitchen, a car, bachon ka education, and sometimes, you should have money for having vacation and your retirement plan, and you're sorted. And I remember when that stage had reached, I suddenly had kind of got into a very contented zone, and relaxed, and I didn't want to really move ahead and do something. So I actually sat down and I wrote, no, I have to revive this target. It was definitely not in while comparison with somebody else, but for my own sake, I had to write it down that no, now this is a new target that I have to for. So is it wrong, or how does it go? I'm just asking you.
It's not wrong. It's good to have new targets. The point is that where do you stop? Are you clear about that? Or rather, as this line says over here, that enough means that you know when to avoid doing something that you will regret. So as long as you are in that zone, you're in that framework, in that boundary that you have defined for yourself, it's fine.
Okay, so that's the compass, like that you should.
Yeah, your internal compass.
Cool.
Very true.
Got it.
Thank you. And this is where you decide. The compass is based on what are the things which are not worth the risk, regardless of the gain. It could be reputation, freedom, family and friends, love, happiness. It's like, there is a going off the book a bit. What do you mean when you say that you have to operate from integrity? What is integrity? Integrity could be honesty, or could be following your internal compass. So what is integrity? Integrity is do what you say by the time you say. Yeah. Basically, integrity is defined as what you are doing when no one is looking. It is not to tick off a compliance report that ye karna hai to iske liye hai. But if that Havaldar is not there, are you still breaking the signal? That is the simplest example of integrity. So that defines where do you stop. And what are those things that you will never ever compromise, irrespective come what may. And that internal benchmark only you can have. Okay, now let's move to the next aspect, the next section, which is about confounding compounding. Compounding, a very commonly known thing. We've all studied about compound interest way back in school, but it's very easily ignored. Albert Einstein says that compounding is the 8th wonder of the world. And he also says that those who understand this know how to make money, and those who don't, they are not able to make it. This kind of phenomenon you may have heard before, that what if I tell you that I'll give you $1 every day, and I'll give you $1 on day 1, and every day I'll double that. So second day I'll give you $2, third day I'll give you $4, fourth day I'll give you $8, fifth day I'll give you $16. By the time you're on day 31st, how much would you have compounded to? What would be the figure over here? Is it $1,000? Is it $10,000? Yeah, tell Nani Rama story. तो कितना होगा? We know that it will be a huge amount. But what will that huge amount be? 1 lakh, 10 lakhs, 1 crore, 10 crores. Any guesses? Okay, let me share the figure. It is 107 crores that you would get to by day 31. And this is the power of compounding. And now link this, as we're talking about compounding, link this to what we saw in the first slide, in the initial slide about 30 years journey of the equity market. Keep that in mind as we discuss about compounding. So talking about compounding, one more thing. Let's say in this example, I start the investing from day 8. Okay, so first 7 days, there is nothing. Day 8 से I'm giving $1, day 9 becomes $2. Now on day 31st, कितना हो जाएगा? Yes, Sachin, 2 raised to 31. So on day 31, how much will it be? How much do you think will be the gap between this amount and the amount we saw earlier? Was that 50%? It's 8.3 million. That's around 83 lakhs. 83 lakhs compared to 107 crores. Just because of a 7-day delay. Most of us know the equation of compounding. What is the equation of compounding that we had learned way back in school? Don't worry, it's not a math test. याद आया तो ठीक है. Yes. Right.
Power of n.
Now here, what is important to understand is that your principal amount, the initial amount, is fixed, but the compounding is a function mainly of the n. See here, let me explain this formula. It is principal into 1 plus rate raised to n, which is number of years. The exponential effect comes with the n. The p and the r are important factors, variables, but the exponential effect comes with the n, where how much time you have kept over there is what makes the difference. So this is almost 99% less just because you started 7 days late. This is a chart of Warren Buffett's net worth. He started investing at the age of 14 or maybe even earlier. In fact, he goes on record to say that he thinks he started investing a bit late. तो सोचो अगर और जल्दी शुरू होता तो क्या होता? His net worth at age 90 is 84.5 billion. And out of the above, 84.1 billion came after his 50th birthday. Out of the above, 81.5 billion came after his 65th birthday. Look at the chart, you'll come to know it. See the graph. So he is a good, astute investor. We all know him. That's why that's his claim to fame, right? But the thing is that it's more about how long you sustain, your longevity decides your survival. And our minds are not built to handle such absurdities. People are eager to pull out of the market the moment it crashes. अरे ये गया अभी कुछ नहीं हो सकता है, or let me, or just let me now invest somewhere else. The next new shiny thing that comes up, वहाँ पे डाल देते हैं, यहाँ से निकालो, यहाँ बहुत time रह चुके. Let's remove the money from here and reinvest it somewhere else. And all this rolling keeps going on. But is there an aim? Is there an objective to it? So Warren Buffett, he isn't just a good investor, he's a good investor for 70 plus years. His skill is investing. His secret is time. And that is how compounding works. The book talks about one more person, Jim Simons. Warren Buffett compounded money at 22% annually, and his net worth at age 90 years, 84.5 billion. Started investing from age 10. Now, Jim Simons, he compounded money at 66% annually. He was the head of a hedge fund and all. But his net worth at age 90, you may think is ज़्यादा होना चाहिए, right? But his net worth was only 21 billion. 1/3 almost. Or 1/4. 25% of this guy. What do you think? What is the reason over here? Time is money. Nice. Jim started investing from age of 50. Pretty late, right? So even getting 3 times more ROI or return on investment, 22%, 66%. He's making 3 times more in terms of the rate of return. But in terms of his net worth, he's 25% less than Warren Buffett because of the timing, because of when he started. That's why I mentioned that in that compound interest formula, the N is so important. Yes, time spent in the market is more important than timing the market. Exactly. The first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. Like that Hero Honda ad was, fill it, shut it, forget it. कर दिया आपने उसमें रखा है, it will grow. And unfortunately, the investor cycle, what we saw earlier, the investor gap and the investment gap comes because of this. All the emotions that people go through and they feel that नहीं अभी peak पे है, अभी निकालते हैं, या फिर they enter at the wrong time, they exit at the wrong time. Earlier I showed you this graph. Now, as Deepak has rightly put in the chat box, it is how much time you are spending in the market that is important. In fact, a study was done in the Indian market from March 1979 to March 2020, where, let's say, if you invested in the Sensex with a 1-year horizon, 1-year periods were taken. So, यहाँ जो number of periods है, 41 1-year periods were taken. So it could be from April to March or May to April, like that. Right? So smaller periods were taken of 1 year, and out of the 41 periods taken, see the first column only, 41 periods wala. The positive returns were got in 27 periods and negative returns were in 14 periods, which means the probability of loss is 34.15%. 14 out of 41. Maximum returns in a single year was 266, but minimum returns was negative 46%. And this is where the volatility comes in, shorter period now. Averagely, it was 22%. But if we extend that years, the time frame, if we say, okay, 3 years ka lete hai, so now there were 3-year periods taken. So 31 periods of 3-year cycles were taken. For example, it could be March 79 to, let's say, Feb 82. So 3 years periods were taken consequently, and there the negative periods dropped to 7 out of 39, so 17.95%. Likewise, if we go on, 5 years, 3 periods were negative. 10 years, 1 period was negative. 12 years, 0 period negative. So equity comes with a risk of volatility. Now the way to treat that volatility is to see how long you can stay invested in the market. The longer term horizon you have, you are able to mitigate that risk to some extent, because that there is not a single period of negative of when we look at beyond 12 years, 15 years, 20 years. Another thing is that people think, when should I put the money? Because what if I put money now when the market crashes? What if there is a correction which comes up? So a better way to do that is through a systematic investment. Systematic investment is doing over, let's say, every month, or you decide the frequency when you want to invest in the market. So let's say you decide to put in money from your fixed deposits into the equity market. What you can do is, instead of putting in one lump sum, you decide that, okay, every month I will put in so much amount, so it gets spread over the period. Now that gives you the benefit of rupee cost averaging. Now, when you are doing systematic investment, lump sum can fail or succeed, but SIP is always good. Yeah. Now the question is that when do you do the SIP? This is another study which is done, taken from Jan 88 to May 2020. Now, people say, but I invested in SIP, but that day only the market was so low, or that day only the market was so high that I missed out buying at the opportune time. So this study was done assuming that you're doing a fixed investment at the highest Sensex value every year from 88 to 2020. Highest Sensex value. You will still make a return of 10.47%. If you're doing at the lowest Sensex value every year, you will still make a return of around 12.65%. But if you're doing it without taking the effort of figuring out when it is low, when it is high, just take a systematic one day every month. Let's say first day of every month. You're still making 11.7262. So not a bad deal, right? So don't spend too much effort in timing the market. What matters is how long you are remaining in the market, which is the time in the market is more important than timing of the market. SIP in different funds, different sectors. Yeah, you can do all that diversification, all that can be done. There are thousands of options which SIP to go for. So you can do all that stock selection or mutual fund selection. You can look at rating agencies like Morningstar, Value Research. They will tell you what kind of mutual funds are good. So of course, all that can be done. But as I said, this book figures on more on the internal mindset rather than the external process. Now, the next part of the book talks about getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. So getting wealthy is one thing and staying wealthy is another. Good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. Getting wealthy will require to take risk, be optimistic, put yourself out there. Staying wealthy will require you to do something opposite of that. Have humility, have an element of fear and paranoia that what you have made can be taken away from you just as fast. Have a frugality in spending, save money, and have a survival mentality. It's about protecting whatever you have created. There is one saying of Warren Buffett. He says that there are only two rules to make money. Rule number one is never lose money. And rule number two is never forget rule number one. Never lose money, because that's the easiest thing that can happen. You've made a lot of effort and brought money and then gone. If you look at the stories and case studies of people who have won the KBC, they've hardly been able to sustain their wealth. जितना जल्दी बनाया उतना ही जल्दी निकल गया आज. So let's see, what did Warren Buffett do to stay wealthy? What he did to get wealthy is his investing skills and all, right? Right, Praveen? Thanks for sharing. So Warren Buffett, what he did, he didn't get carried away with debt. He didn't panic and sell during 14 recessions. Imagine this. There were 14 recessions in his lifetime. And he didn't panic and sell at all. And there's no comparison here, but just sharing that when the market crashed in 2020, I also didn't panic or exit any of my investments. And today I am reaping the benefits of it. It's about how much stoic and patience you can have in the market. He didn't sully his business reputation. Never enough, wala. You go out of your way to do things. He didn't attach himself to one single strategy. He was very flexible. He didn't burn himself out and quit or retire. If you notice, we're talking about what Warren Buffett did, but all the pointers are what he didn't do. And that is where the survival mechanism comes in. That is where the survival techniques are. It's not about what you do. What you had to do, you've done, you've got the wealth. Now you're how you're protecting it. Yes, Sulekha, thank you. He survived with his longevity. So actionable takeaways here. Aim to be financially unbreakable. Be able to stick out in swings in the market and stay in the game long enough for compounding to work its magic. Do not interrupt your investment unnecessarily. And one of the ways, talking about a technique to do it, is that do not put all your money in the stock market upfront. One is, of course, you put it systematically, that is what we saw. But even other things, have a certain buffer, a certain kitty that you put in emergency funds, liquid funds, debt-oriented funds. How to be financially unbreakable is by ensuring that when you need money, you don't have to go to the stock market to sell your funds, to sell your shares. That is the uninterrupted flow. When you need money, you should be able to liquidate from your FDs or your debt-based instruments. So it's not that you never put in debt and FDs. You need to have a proper asset allocation. That's what it's called. The most important part of every plan is to plan for the plan not going according to plan. A good plan leaves room for error. Be optimistic about the future and also paranoid about the obstacles to your success. So this is one of my famous quotes. Everything is fixable as long as you are flexible. If you say नहीं मेरा वचन ही है शासन, ऐसा ही होना है, मैंने बोल दिया तो this is what should happen. तो क्या? How flexible you can be in terms of realizing that things around you are going to be uncertain. How flexible you can be knowing that things around you are going to change. How flexible you can be knowing that you yourself are going to change. We'll talk about that as well. One of the chapters is that you will change. It's not that just external situations will change. How you will change. So it's actionable key takeaways here. It's impossible to prepare for or anticipate what you cannot envision. So what can you do? Rainy day funds are a good idea. Save for things you cannot anticipate or predict. So that when you need to tap into your resources or liquidate your funds, you are not exiting from the market at the wrong time. Biggest single point of failure with money is the sole reliance on a paycheck to fund your short-term spending needs. With no savings, you create a gap between what you think your expenses are and what they might be in the future. So your earnings is one thing, but earnings say if all your earnings are just going into your current expenses, then there is no scope that you have left for your future savings. So how can you plan your expenses, your rather managing your money better so that you have certain amounts for the present and at the same time parking aside money for the future, which is saving and investing. And talking about reliance on a certain on a single paycheck, what Warren Buffett says is that if you don't find the way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. So how do you make sure that, I know some of you are in jobs, even I was in job earlier, right? And how can you start creating multiple streams of income? Start focusing on that as well. And today there are several avenues available to focus on multiple streams of income. There are digital sources, there are blogging or even creating your online stuff or creating something that will sell for you even when you are not awake and not actively doing it. Right? Okay, next big idea here is tail investments. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. And this is where you work on diversification. Whatever you are investing, don't put it all in one single asset, one single investment class, or one single stock. Spread it out. And when you spread it out, be prepared that half your decisions may be wrong. But the half which will be right will still cover up for the wrong ones. So you look, as we saw, there is a room for error. You don't have to be right 100% of the time. Some examples here, Disney Studios. 83 minutes of Snow White is the outcome of creating 400 cartoons which did not work. There's a study shown from America on 21,000 venture financing in 10 years from 2004 to 2014. 65% lost money. 2.5% made 10 to 10 times, 10 to 20 times. 1% made more than 20%, 20 times return. And only about 100 made around 50 times return. But the venture financing guys still call it a success overall because those tail investments, the ones which work for them, were good enough to overpower the ones which did not work. And same for large public stocks also. Even if you're investing in the equity market, spread it out in such a way that there will be certain things which may not work. Sometimes some investments will not be that great. It's okay. Not all of them have to work. We are not predictors of the economy or the market. We are taking a chance, and everything is a game of probability. Yeah, why it is called tail? They are rare events. Yeah. In fact, Warren Buffett has gone on record to say that he has owned shares in 400 to 500 different companies over his life. And significant gains came only from a handful, just 10 of them. How many of you are aware that Amazon had come up with a phone, a smartphone? Amazon Fire Phone. Not aware of, right? It was a major flop. And the company lost around 170 million in that. Now, what do you think Jeff Bezos would have said after this event? Do you think he would have apologized to the stockholders? Oh, sorry, that was a wrong decision. This is what he said. If you think that's a big failure, we are working on much bigger failures right now. I'm not kidding. Some of them are going to make the Fire Phone look like a tiny little blip. And his tail event over here, his tail investment was Amazon Web Services, which today constitutes around 60% of his operating revenue. Yes, like another Edison. Yeah. So, what is the learning from it? The learning is that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay that the decisions went wrong. Bring in more wrong decisions so that you realize that, okay, there is a probability. Eventually, it will average out. There will be certain wrongs, there will be certain rights. But to have one good idea, what you need is a lot of ideas. To have one good business investment, what you need is a lot of business investments. Because whether it was right or wrong, that will only be decided in hindsight, whether it works for you or not. Napoleon Bonaparte said that a military genius is the man who can do the average thing when all those around them are going crazy. And it is exactly the same even with investing. So, actionable takeaways here. Since it is impossible to know which investments will generate huge returns and which will not, it is wise to spread out your bets instead of going all on one investment. Make at least 10 equal investment in a diversified group of companies, currencies, commodities, or other assets that you think can double in the next 5 years. And be prepared, not all of them will double in the next 5 years. But इसमें से आधा भी double हो गया, even 5 are doubled, they will make you a good average consistent return. So one way is to invest in 10 equal instruments, pick your stocks and decide which stocks you want to invest. So it will require your time and effort to do a stock selection. Or simple way out for the busy people who don't have time to monitor any stocks, invest in the index. Invest in the Sensex, invest in the Nifty. The Sensex typically is a sensitive index of the BSE, which is made up of 30 stocks. Identify those 30 stocks and invest in them. An even better way is, instead of making 30 different investments in 30 stocks, there is something called as a index fund. Invest in that. Yeah, Nasdaq also. I'm using the Indian example to make it simple here. But even Nasdaq, S&P 500, anyway. Beside the index, and there are index funds which are available. They are kind of mutual funds. And they get traded at the price of the current index. Probably Sensex 60,000 pairs. So that will be the value of the index fund as well. And as the index goes up, that will go up. When the index goes down, that will go down. Now, what is index? ये समझना थोड़ा जरूरी है. The index is made up of 30 stocks. Which are these 30 stocks? They are the best of the best of the best 30. Which means that tomorrow, let's say your stock number 2 does not perform well. It crashes, or company goes bankrupt, or whatever, fraud nikla ho company, whatever. We can't predict, right, what goes on in future. What will happen? That stock will move out of the index. Let's say number 2 stock goes down, nikal gaya index ke baad, number 3 will become number 2, and so on. Number 31 will now become 30. Index will still remain the composition of 30 things. Yes. Index, investing in index fund better than index in the equity mutual fund. Better or worse, both have their own pros and cons. If you invest in equity mutual funds, the fund manager's capability will be added of making the alpha. That's called the alpha, which is the differential between the index and the fund manager's decisions. Index funds mein wo alpha nahi milega. It will go as per the index only. It will just replicate and mimic the composition of the index. They are passive funds. Yeah. This is a screenshot, a snapshot of how the index has changed over time. Just to show you that index is not a constant anyway. It is the best of the top 30. I could get the data only till 2018. Of course, the 2021 data is also easily available, but comparative data nahi mila. So I've just taken this chart for today's purpose. And you see how the composition has changed. You may realize that there were companies way back in 88 which are not even there today in the index today. And that's the benefit of the index. It automatically takes care of putting in the best companies. And you'll see some which are there even since 1980. So some are like outperformers, and some have gone and come, and they are no longer there. So what is wealth? I asked you initially. Wealth is the ability to fully experience life without worrying about paisa kahan se aayega. Yeah. So the ability to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. And this is the highest dividend that money pays. This is the freedom. This is the well-being component of the wealth. Money's greatest intrinsic value is its ability to give you control over your time. There is a very interesting paradox which Morgan Housel talks about. Let's say you see someone in a luxury car like a Rolls Royce or a Jaguar or a BMW. You see it passing by you. What is it? What thought would come to your mind? Please type in the chat box. Wow. Wish I had one. Yeah. What else? Wow, wow, में क्या आता है? He has done really best. Okay, beautiful car. Comparison, awesome. Where is that wow coming from? Is it for the person who is in the car? How often do you really look के गाड़ी के अंदर कौन है? Great four wheels, headache to maintain. My Indian car is better. What a pleasure having such an experience. Yeah. One day I'll get it. Exactly. This is the man in the car paradox. What did he do to get that? Driver is never noticed. We really don't look and say, kaun hai, kaun chala raha hai, who it would be. When you see someone driving a nice car, you rarely think, wow, that guy driving the car is good, is cool. Instead, you think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I am cool. And this is how people think. A lot of effort is put on buying luxurious items. People tend to want wealth to signal to others that they should be liked and admired. But in reality, those other people often bypass admiring you. Not because they don't think wealth is admirable, but because they use your wealth as a benchmark for their own desire to be liked and admired. Interesting psychology, right? I'm sure all of us will agree. We all think, wow, wish I had that car. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. And the other thing which goes along with this is that wealth is what you don't see. Wealth is what actually lies in the bank. Wealth is what lies in your mutual fund statements, your stock investments, your FDs. That is real wealth. Everything else, what is seen, is not the real wealth. It is just a show of how much money you have. And spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. So wealth is what you don't see. Wealth is hidden. It is income that is not spent. It is the nice cars that you have not purchased, the diamonds which you have not bought, the watches that you have not worn, the clothes forgone, and the first class upgrade that you have declined. Wealth is the financial assets that haven't yet been converted into stuff that you see. That's not how we think about wealth, because you cannot contextualize what you don't see. Rich is the current income. When people say they want to be a millionaire, what they actually mean is they want to spend $1 million. And if you spend money on things, you will end up with things, not money. Think about it. The problem is that you will find a lot of rich people to see, to model, to admire, to like. But you will not see a lot of wealthy people whom you can notice, because the hidden nature of wealth makes it hard to imitate others and learn from their ways. The world is full with people who look modest but are actually wealthy, and with people who look rich but are living at the razor's edge of insolvency. There is lots more I can keep going on. Yeah. Being wealthy is opposite of being seen wealthy. Yeah. If I give you this equation, dash minus dash is equal to dash, where you have to fill up with savings, income, and expenses, how would you fill it up? What would be there? Just type in the chat box. Income minus savings equal to expense. Yeah, that would be the right way to put it. But there are people who would say that income minus expense is equal to saving. And that is the spender category. The saver category is income minus savings is equal to expense. You first decide how much you're going to save and then spend. The third category on top of that is the investor. Don't just stop at saving, also make it grow. So don't save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. And another of my quotes over here, saving before spending is not about being a miser. It's just about being a little bit wiser. Okay, so surprises, we have seen that, how everything is can be how surprises are going to come up all the way. Surprise is not a failure of analysis, it's a failure of imagination, because you are not able to imagine a future that you have not seen before. Okay, there are a few more things, but I think in interest of time, we will stop over here, right? So I want you all to type in your key takeaways from the session in the chat box.
Meher, can I just say something? Yeah. Meanwhile, while you all are typing, your key takeaways in the chat box, I would request another master here who is there in the audience, Anand Patil. He's also a
Vashindhara.
who conducts training sessions, and he especially mentioned that this book is close to his heart too as soon as it was declared. So a few words and something more that you could add on to, Anand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful session. Actually, this book is actually a foundation book for anybody and everybody who wants to master personal finance. My personal takeaway of this particular book is savings is the key for everything, and a lot of people don't do it. As far as compounding is concerned, in fact, I have missed the boat quite far-fetched. But what I did, and which I really feel is in line with this particular book, is I baselined my standard of living at the age of 40. And that's how I could cope up with all the ups and downs. At least that much I can really tell. But I read this book twice, and I am really, really fond of this particular book. Thank you very much for a wonderful session, Basu and Mehrnoj, both. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anand. Thank you so much, Anand. Mehrnoj, what a session it was, needless. And one quote after the other, like one quote, we were just trying to, I think at least I was trying to digest, introspect, think where it works. Something else comes up. So I think we'll really take a lot of time to go through the, session again, understand what you really said, what it really means and how to really apply. But lot of takeaways, and I think me and Nitin will actually sit back now with a cup of coffee and write down where we are, where we want to go, where we did mistakes. Everybody also in the audience would do that. I'm 100% sure. And I think that was the power of this session. Superb, Meher. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was an honor to have you here as a speaker today, and I think everybody will say the same thing. We can just take one or two questions because we
I
will
would
have
like to also share.
close the. Yeah.
I'll just like to share one more last slide where you can stay in touch with me. So you can email address, my phone number here, and my website, and you can follow me on social media as well. Mehrnoj W3. Thank you.
Meher is also part of our Read to Lead WhatsApp group, Telegram group. So you can always find his phone number and details. And I think you just type Mehrnoj R and it takes Randeria and everything appears on the screen. So you can't miss, you just can't miss Mehrnoj. So if we can take one question, we can. Yes.
Yeah, can I speak?
Praveen Gupta, please, quickly.
So first of all, I would like to thank you, Meher sir, for this wonderful session. And to be very honest, after going through your session, I realized this book is different what I have read actually. So maybe I have not understood to the depth that you have been able to brought it in 1.5 hours. I think it's my lack of ability to grasp this book. But now I am so sure that if I reread this book after this session, this is going to be really a fabulous one. So I'm so thankful. And to be very honest, what I look for in each and every book and kind of things, what is the action? I mean, I read 5 chapters. What is for me to do it? And you have ready-made prepared here. That is really crux, I think. I'm really, really honored to be part of this session. Awesome. Sir, if you can share one
Thank you.
slide, 3 slides back where you mentioned this equation of P
Manoj,
and
will
I.
you be sharing the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I can share the PowerPoint.
So we will be sharing the because everybody will need one slide or the other. So we'll be sharing the PDF of all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
PowerPoint in both the groups, in the WhatsApp group and Telegram group. So be assured.
So I'm not part of
Sure.
any of the groups, so
And
that's what I was
Please
thinking.
join. Please join.
Yeah, so
How to
how
join?
can everyone join? Just can
How to
announce
join,
that.
Vasundhara ji?
How to join? Yeah, you can just type in Read to Lead on Facebook. There is a Facebook page. You can send a message to me 982-156-0956.
You can type in your chat box, your
Typing it
number
in the chat box. Nitin,
Yeah.
please type it in the chat box. And you're
But
part
trust
of
me, it
the
was an
group.
absolute fabulous session, really.
Whoever
Thank you.
has shared this information with you, that person can actually send a message to me. We can get you included, and we already have a
Mehal sir himself invited us actually.
great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Guruji, for getting all the Shishyas here today for the session. So
I would also like to say something.
Ulka, don't talk to me. Mehrnosh has come after almost 7 or 8 sessions. It's only Mehrnosh's charm that she has come here today. Yes, Ulka.
Yes, of course. Who can miss this session? Yeah, he's such a wonderful person. I've known him
Thank
since
you.
ITC time, and many workshops we have done. And Mehrnosh sharing these PPTs is like a biggest Diwali gift for me. Thank you very much, and it was a wonderful session. I'm going to start saving first and then spending because I'm a big spender. So that's the biggest learning for me to be more wiser. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Ulka has voiced out everybody's feelings. Thank you so much, Meher. We are in short of time because we'll have to close. Before that, Nitin, have you taken the photographs?
Yeah, it's already taken the last
Thank
time
you.
itself.
Thank you so much. Time to announce the next book. For the first time, we are going to have as a speaker, an army person, Major Ashlesha, Dr. Major Ashlesha, and she is going to speak on Secret Medicine by Arthur Haley. I was waiting, is my favorite author. And I'm sure those who have read Arthur Haley know what he actually brings in the book. So please don't miss. Next month, December, first week, I think it's 5th of December, first Sunday, 9 o'clock. I'll be sharing the registration link on all the platforms. Please be part of it. Thank you so much. Keep rocking. Thank you so much, Meher. Meher, I have to rush to Pune. I need one small interview. I'll send you a link tomorrow. We'll talk.
Sure.
Super.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye all. Bye all.
Bye.